Hello, and welcome to Scarlet Tavern. Grab a drink, take a seat, and let's begin. Before we dive deep into today's intense topic, let me share a little behind the scenes tidbit. Did you know that while preparing for this episode, my research took me down so many rabbit holes, I almost ended up in Wonderland? Alice, the Mad Hatter, and even the White Rabbit were all giving me side eyes. But don't worry, I managed to climb back out, not without some odd tea party invitations to bring you the real, riveting story of Ruby Ridge. Alright, enough with my misadventures into podcast research land. Let's get to it. This is Scarlet Tavern. Alright.
Oh, that was a different intro.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to make jokes about Ruby Ridge.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
I think that may hit some wrong chords if I do the jokes. So, how to make a joke not about Ruby Ridge.
Folks, I just want to point this out. I've known Caleb for a while. I can tell you right now, he's made some of the darkest, most inappropriate jokes I've ever heard of. But by God, we finally found something that actually tempered his humor. So
I have changed
that should
over
tell
the
you
years.
something. Yeah, that is true.
So the way we were planning on doing this was originally we were going to release a 9/11 episode near 9/11. Obviously, the time of this recording, that is in 5 days. So, not going to be possible. But basically, the entire month of November, we are going to start doing terrorist stuff. This starting with Ruby Ridge, then moving on to Waco, then moving to Timothy McVeigh and Oklahoma City, and then we will cap it off with 9/11. Obviously, later on in the series, we'll probably do some more terrorist stuff. So we have like the Boston Marathon bomber and stuff like that. But I did want to hit 9/11 during the anniversary month. Can you believe it has been 22 years since 9/11?
Yeah.
I was thinking about that the other day. I was getting out of the shower and I was thinking about the podcast. And I was like, oh, 9/11, yeah. That was like 12 years ago. I was like, wait, no, that was 2001. That's 22 years.
Yeah. I mean, you and I are the kids of 9/11. You know, we're the ones who all were in school when it all went down, and having to. I mean, I honestly I did not learn about what really happened until I got home.
Yeah.
And
so I'll give my perspective. We'll offer three very unique perspectives. Obviously, we're not touching on 9/11 today, but I want to talk about it because, again, it is in 5 days. It's in less than a week, the anniversary. So we'll give three very different perspectives. So my perspective, I was in elementary school, I believe, and I don't remember what we were doing in class, but I remember all the teachers getting phone calls and being told to turn on the TVs. And our classrooms had those TVs that were up in the big tube TVs that were up in the corner of the classrooms on the walls. So the teacher,
I remember,
because we had our elementary school had news every morning. Like,
oh, you had those too?
I was
didn't have those until high school.
I was part of the news team for a little bit. So, we had the news, so we had those TVs, and so they ended up turning it on, and obviously I was 2001, I was 9, so I didn't really understand everything, but I remember the teachers freaking out. What? 9 years old, I would have been. What grade would I have been in? Fifth? No, like third or fourth, I think, something like that. Um, and I remember them freaking out, and then all the parents coming to pick up the kids because they believed schools would be hit next. And in my town, we had like it. I correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was a fertilizer plant that they created fertilizer.
We had a fertilizer manufacturing facility,
Yeah.
and we also had a chemical weapon, not weapon, but a chemical research facility that was owned by a three-letter company. Um, First initial is a D. Um, and they did like um, insecticide and that kind of thing research, but it was very hush hush research.
So the rumor
So
was
we
that it was
think that it
government
was,
stuff.
yeah, that it was a little bit more than just insecticide kind of thing, but that was put on a watch.
Yeah. So they did threat analysis, and the our hometown could have been one of the targets because of that, because it would cause a mass casualty. So they evacuated all the schools and everything. And I remember going home, and we went to Uncle Mike's house and all watched the news, because we didn't have cable TV then. Um, and I remember my dad getting woken up and having to go into work because he was a deputy. So, and he'll give you his remembrance of that. But and it turns out, fun fact, and Ben, I don't know if I ever told you this, but the hijackers trained at a flight school in my hometown.
What? I knew they
So,
trained. I
so
knew they trained in Florida, but I didn't know it was
Piper,
your hometown.
Piper, Piper Aircrafts.
They trained at a school called Flight Safety International.
Yep, which was
Um,
held by Piper.
right, it was right next to Piper Aircraft. Um, Now, Flight Safety International has schools all throughout the world, not
Yeah.
just Florida. But the one that happens to be in Florida is right there at Vero Beach.
In my hometown.
So, yeah.
So
And
these guys that boarded these planes, crashed into the Twin Towers, trained in my hometown. So, needless to say, that school was shut down for a little bit. And they did some serious vetting. And correct me if I'm wrong. We'll actually jump right over into your side of it because I want Ben's last, being a New Yorker. But we'll jump right into your side. But correct me if I'm wrong, but the sheriff's office made it to that school fairly quickly when they found out.
um, how we found out was, well, first of all, I remember that morning I was actually working midnights, had gotten home, and I got woken up by your mom, who was like, "Hey, there's something going on. We need to go over to Mike's house." So I just threw on some clothes, went over with everybody, and we're watching this whole thing unfold on the news. And at that point, my pager goes off, and I'm like, "Up, gotta
Yes.
go."
Yes, kids, we had pagers then.
Pagers, yes. And
God.
I know, right?
And next house.
And
Did you take notes with your Palm Pilot?
I had a Palm Pilot.
yes.
I had a Palm
Yes,
Pilot.
I did. Yes. I know.
I had a BlackBerry too.
Stay smart, man. Yeah. So ended up having to go in, and we were put on standby. But how we found out about flight safety was myself and a couple other deputies were patrolling in that area, and I just had a funny feeling about a vehicle that was there, and I'm like, it doesn't relate. It should not be here. This just doesn't. What's going on? Excuse me. So I went ahead, and at the time I had a laptop and ran the tag, and um, I immediately get a phone call from dispatch, and they're like, "You need to go over to a private channel." And I'm like, "Okay, what's going on? Did you run such and such a tag?" I'm like, "Yeah. Why?" "You need to back away from that vehicle and don't go anywhere near the vehicle or the school. And when you can get to a secure landline, call us." So I'm like, okay, well, we had a substation right down the road.
Yes, kids, we
So I
had
went
landlines.
there. What's that?
I said, yes, kids, we had landlines back then, too.
We did. So I used the secure landline there at the substation, called in. Turns out that vehicle, several other vehicles, and the school were under surveillance by the FBI as members of the terrorist group that was responsible for the attack. So that's kind of how it came about for us.
Yeah, my little hometown, very very small hometown, ended up behind a huge plot. So, not many things came out of my hometown, except for that, another terrorist, and a country singer, Jake Owen.
And a high profile murder.
Yes,
Had
yes.
a couple of those.
Which actually, Bundy came through our town back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
The family of the woman he murdered in the town just above mine still lives there. Fun fact.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Ben, you grew up in New York. We're in New York for 9/11. How was it as a New Yorker? Obviously, you were young, but
So, I mean, even being in Buffalo on the far side of New York, I mean, Buffalo and New York City, we are
oh yeah,
literally we're on the extreme, ends of the state, but
but your state as a whole.
yeah, for state as a whole, everything got activated. So, one of the things I remember a few things. First off, I remember the teachers acted very cagey. That's the only word I can think of it. So
Trying not to show that they're freaked out and not freak you guys out.
I kept remembering so the way my school was, it was an elementary and a middle school all in one, and I was in the middle school part. I was in the 8th grade. So the middle school teachers were would bounce between each other in the hallway. But then I started noticing they keep running, the 6th grade teacher, he keeps running over to the 8th grade, which is where I'm at. 7th grade's going here, there, and then for some reason our 4th grade teacher showed up. I'm like, what the hell is she doing here? The principal showed up, and then, of course, then somebody's like, what's going on? It's like, just everybody please keep the people of New York and Washington, D.C. in your prayers. And I was like, that's weird. For those you don't know, I went to a Catholic school.
Yes.
So we actually finished the day. I believe we finished the day. I can't remember, but it was really odd. And then I started seeing where we were located. We were right by the pickup area where like the parents would come to pick up their kids, and I started seeing them, and I can't remember seeing parents were getting out of their car like, what the heck is going on? And we're like, what the hell's going on? So I get on the bus, going to my grandparents' house, because that's where I got dropped off on the bus. Bus driver said, yeah, some yahoo just crashed. He was an old guy. Some yahoo just crashed a plane into a building in New York City. And I'm like, what? Oh, that's what this is all about. Yeah. Country's going to hell in a handbasket, kid. He said that. That's a direct quote. He actually said that to me.
The man that's probably served in World War II.
Yeah, actually, I think he did. Actually, I genuinely think he did. Now that I think about it, because he was definitely a veteran. I know that much. So I get home. My grandparents got the news on, and they're like, "Come here." And he starts showing me, and then I see. At this point, when I got home, obviously the towers have fallen. The Pentagon has been hit. They're already, the newest thing on there was the crash of the plane, Flight 93, into the Pennsylvania. My mom got off work early. She came and picked me up, and I remember two things. So going home, we passed by one of these streets, and on the street was a kid from my school. His dad was a state trooper, and there was in this particular part where I live, there was a lot of like cops and firefighters who lived there. They were all packing their trucks up.
Oh yeah, especially the state troopers, because they can be activated to New York City.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I found out later. That's what they did. The one dude, the state trooper, everybody, he got activated. He got sent there, and a few of the firefighters and EMSs in the area were packing up and going. Like I remember seeing him. I'm like, hey, that's Mr. So. I'm not going to say names, but hey, there's Mr. So and So. What's he doing? And my mother's like, I think he's going to New York City. I'm like, oh. Another thing. So the part of Buffalo I lived in has a very predominant Muslim community, mostly people from Yemen. Usually they're pretty active in the sense of like they're always you always see somebody, you know, in Middle Eastern garb walking around with their kids and everything. Ghost town.
Oh yeah.
What all that was left there was a tumbleweed. That's all you needed. I was like, where is everybody? Like everything was on like lockdown. Like that's not to say the other parts of Buffalo were active. Like everything. That's in New York. We were so like, oh my god, they're coming for us. You could have thrown a rock right down Delaware Avenue, and Caleb and Aaron have been to Buffalo, so they know that this is a pretty busy area. Yeah. You could have thrown a rock at full speed, like a fastball.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, Caleb. I don't know if you remember Brian, the mechanic.
Oh, I thought it starts with an R. Last name? Okay. Because I don't want. We're not throwing names out there. Yes. I almost said it just out of habit.
I know. So did I, and I was like, nope. Let me stop. He was with the sheriff's office at the same time I was.
Hey, buddy, if you're listening, hi.
He was also part of a certain military group. I mean, can we say?
Yeah. We're not saying his name.
Color.
We're not saying
color.
Yeah, we're not. We're not saying his name, so we can say it.
Okay, so it won't jeopardize anything. He happened to be a member of Green Berets response team, and that at the time that 9/11 happened, we had all been talking back and forth, and he looks at me and he goes, "I have to go." I'm like, "What do you mean you have to go?" He goes, "I have to drive up to Patrick to get on a secure line to talk to my commander." And that's all he would say. While he and I had talked because of our mutual backgrounds on what he did and that kind of thing. So I knew at that point that this was bigger than what we knew.
And then right after that is when we got activated to Iraq and Afghanistan.
And he disappeared for what, 3 months, 4 months? Nobody knew where he was.
He was one of the first teams with boots on the ground.
Yeah.
So.
Oh dang.
Yeah, I should tell you how much of a badass he was.
Yeah, I mean,
still is.
Cool guy.
Still is.
Down to earth. I mean, do anything for you, but when the shit hit the fan, he's the one you wanted to look over and see next to you.
He was a member of SWAT, did all of that stuff.
Yeah, he just all around awesome guy.
And then retired from the sheriff's office and opened a garage.
Yeah,
to repair cars.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and I don't know what he's doing now, but
now another interesting tidbit about my part of Buffalo, Lackawanna. I don't think I actually showed you guys Lackawanna when you guys were up here.
We drove through it, I think.
Yeah. But my Lackawanna, where I'm born and raised from, we actually had an Al Qaeda cell. Like they were recruited homegrown. Like Al Qaeda sent a recruiter to Buffalo, and they recruited. Technically, they recruited 7. They call it the Lackawanna 6, mostly because these 6 guys were left behind and caught. The 7th guy somehow got away, or he went to Yemen for something. He ended up getting killed by a drone. Thank you, President Obama.
We'll you can continue, but we'll make a note to add them into our 9/11 episode.
Oh yeah.
Because we'll talk about the school in my town too.
Yeah, so that's also Buffalo's claim to fame in the War on Terror. We actually had an Al Qaeda cell, a sleeper cell, as they kept calling it. It was a sleeper cell. I'm told, officially they downplayed it a lot. They said that they were Al Qaeda and they were recruited, but they weren't like activated. They were just kind of like on standby mode in case, like, hey, you're waiting for a call to go do something. But they never specified. But through the as I like to call the Western New York grapevine, because if you go in the middle, somehow there's always somebody from Western New York anywhere you go, in the military or anywhere. Word got back to us is like, no, they were actually a lot more active. We downplayed it because we didn't want to start a race riot, basically, because that's exactly what would have happened. They said it was like that. Probably nobody really wanted to see part of Buffalo get burned to the ground for the actions of 7 assholes.
And for those that don't know what a sleeper cell is, it's literally what it sounds like. It's a group of terrorists that are living their everyday lives, usually in America, and they get activated by a higher up, and they are sent to do specific tasks. Sleeper cell can have 3 people, it can have 50. If you're curious, there was an amazing show called Sleeper Cell.
Mm-hmm.
Where in the show, there was an FBI agent who is a practicing Muslim who goes undercover and joins a sleeper cell, and
great show.
Only had 2 seasons, unfortunately, but it was one of the best shows. And if you're interested about how sleeper cells work, go watch Sleeper Cell, because here's amazing.
A little lesser known fact: after the whole 9/11 incident, the FBI came under scrutiny because they were aware of the 125 sleeper cells that are currently active in the United States.
Oh boy, add that to the list of failings of the FBI.
And the number may be higher. I don't know. It seems to me that at the time it was like 124 or 125. I forget.
Active sleeper cells during 9/11?
Yes.
Let me find out.
And I distinctly remember, because it was in one of our briefings with the sheriff's office, that the FBI had to eat a little crow and said, yeah, we were aware. We didn't think it was a valid threat. Blah, blah, blah.
Well, as we're about to see, this is the track record of the FBI and the U.S. government when dealing with terrorists, both foreign-born terrorists and domestic, homegrown ones, is certainly going to be something's going to be left desired, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, historically, unfortunately, they tend to take a lackadaisical approach initially, and then when there's a shit show that comes of it, they do a knee-jerk reaction to try and recover from that and create a bigger shit show and the next reaction. And it usually takes them 3 or 4 incidences to finally settle down and go, oh, okay, now we got it under control. And I don't know why they do that, but they do, unfortunately.
I can't find any exact information that's not classified.
I'm sure if we just go to the J. Edgar Hoover building, they'll gladly let us have access.
Oh, sure, sure.
I mean, I do still have connections, but okay, so
please don't do anything that gets me my clearance revoked and gets me under indictment.
let's get on to today's topic finally, Ruby Ridge. So,
Yes.
Randy Weaver was born on January 3rd, 1948 in Villisca, Iowa. Villisca is a small town in southwestern Iowa, and its rural setting likely influenced his appreciation for a more isolated and self-reliant lifestyle. That's saying it nicely. So there isn't a significant amount of publicized detail regarding his early years, but it can be inferred from the environment that he grew up in a predominantly white rural setting, which may have influenced his later views and choices. After high school, Randy served in the U.S. Army during the late 60s and 70s. It is rumored that he was a Green Beret. Again, there's evidence pointing, if you look at his DD-214, saying that he, and I may try and do a records pull for this because he's dead now. So I may try and do a records pull and see if we can get his DD-214. So he, according to his DD-214, he was not a Green Beret, but according to what he said, which we know a lot of people do like to embellish their careers, he says he was a Green Beret, indicating that he received specialized training in unconventional warfare, among other military skills. Of course, he is in the Vietnam era. If he was truly a Green Beret in Vietnam, he is one of the baddest men on the planet, because those guys were insane. So, being in Vietnam, coupled with the general distrust many had for the government during those years, might have planted early seeds of skepticism and disillusionment towards authority and government in his psyche. Randy Weaver married Vicki Jordison in the early 70s. Together they had 4 children: Sarah, Samuel, Rachel, and Elishaba. Vicky was known to have strong religious beliefs, which centered around an impending apocalypse. Her beliefs seem to have played a significant role in the family's decisions, including her move to Idaho. I believe that they were like hardcore Christian.
Like even like I believe like they were like those almost stereotypical deep backwoods apocalyptic, fire and brimstone Baptist types. I don't know if they were like Seventh Day Adventist or any of those other things, but they definitely held like some pretty radical views on Christian beliefs.
She's LDS. She's Mormon. Church of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
So just as bad. They're basically terrorists. Mormons are basically terrorists, but
oh god, please direct all hate mail
to Ben Edwards.
No.
No. There's some extremism inside the LDS, especially with coupling with being white. On top of that, it kind of played into a little bit of what's going to happen. In the early 80s, possibly influenced by their evolving beliefs and desire to break away from mainstream society, the Weaver family decided to relocate. They sought an off-the-grid lifestyle and chose Ruby Ridge, a remote area in North Idaho. They purchased a 20-acre property there and built a cabin with modern amenities, further emphasizing their desire for isolation and self-sustainability. The family lived a simple life on Ruby Ridge, homeschooling their children, largely keeping to themselves. They were preparing for the end times, a belief strongly held particularly by Vicky.
Now, one thing that should be noted about this area we're about to move into, basically, Randy, the Weaver's neighbors. This area, as he said, is northern Idaho, but just to give you an idea, if anybody ever looks at a map, we're talking like the top panhandle of Idaho. This is like this is as isolated as you get. A lot of people go up to this place to just kind of be forgotten. This is an area where you'll find a lot of like breakaway extremist groups, anti-government types having their little compounds up there. At least it was back then. I don't know about today, but
and then just for just so everybody knows, they paid $5,000 for this property.
It's actually not. I've seen pictures of the property and how big it is. That's actually kind of a steal.
Especially, yeah. I mean, and that's in the '80s. 20 acres for $5,000. I would pay that in a heartbeat.
I would like to know the Weaver's real estate dealer because he.
Yeah. So, during their time at Ruby Ridge, the Weavers began to adopt more extremist views. This included white separatist beliefs, which advocate for a separate nation or region exclusively for white individuals. Randy Weaver became acquainted with members of the Aryan Nation, a white supremacist group. Although he was not an active member of the group, his association with them brought him to the attention of law enforcement. Now, I will say that the Aryan Nation did have meetings at Ruby Ridge. They were seen there frequently, which again is how he got on their radar. People were following the Aryan Nation because, for lack of a better term, Aryan Nation are terrorists as well.
And also, in a few years before Ruby Ridge, the Aryan Nation and other white supremacist groups have been pretty active in the terms of their own acts of terrorism. They had been involved in a fairly high level. I say high level in the sense of it's a high profile assassination of a kind of a Jewish shock jock. He was known to be very antagonistic to white supremacists and other hate groups across the nation, to the point where he almost would encourage them to call his station, and he would, he get them into these little debates. He get them worked up, flustered up, and then he just abruptly hung up on them. And he was actually killed while he was leaving dinner, I believe, with his ex-wife or something. And I forget the name. I'm gonna have to look it up. But he was a shock jock, and he was killed by white supremacists. And then, not long after, that same group got into a shootout with the Washington State Police and the FBI. So everybody's getting really okay, the white supremacists and the Aryan and the neo-Nazis are getting really froggy lately.
Well, and so keep in mind, this is late 70s when what you're talking about now is late 70s, because Ruby Ridge was in the 80s. You got to what people need to understand is the reason that this happened is you had the whole MLK movement. MLK died in 68. I believe it was 68. So that really sparked a lot of stuff to abolish segregation and things like that. Bringing together, you started to have schools that were starting to mix races, things like that, all throughout the 70s. And it's funny to think about because, of course, us as 90s kids and things like that, we don't ever think about this, but my dad was born in 1970, and in the world you grew up in, segregation was still a trickling thing. Segregation didn't really stop until the 80s.
Oh yeah, I mean there was still, I mean,
you were a little different.
It was one of those things where, for me, it was different because I'm a military brat. I'm an Air Force brat. Always was, 20 years. So we had our clique, and it didn't matter race, color, creed. It was, if you're, because McGuire at the time, this was before it became the joint base that it is now. So there was McGuire and Fort Dix that were basically separated by a road and a gate. And we would ride our bikes from McGuire over to Fort Dix, hang out with the Army brats. They would come over to the Air Force Base, hang out with the Air Force brats. Every once in a while, we'd go down to the Naval Base, which was down the road, and hang out with them. But in that dynamic carried on into the high school when we went into public school. So for us, there was that camaraderie, regardless of what color their skin was. But you could still see, like, when you would go off base into town, even though it was proclaimed that, well, segregation is dead, those looks were there. When we'd have our non-Caucasian friends, it didn't matter if they were black, Indian, whatever, we'd get the looks, you know? And you're talking that was all the way up until, like, man, I don't know, 84-ish, 85. So up to the time that I was like 14, 15 years old.
And fun fact, my dad went to high school and was best friends with a world famous singer.
Yeah.
My dad was best friends with the lead singer of All for One.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Delius Kennedy.
Yeah. A quick thing. The murdered radio DJ that I was talking about was Alan Berg. He was killed by a white supremacist group simply called the Order.
Yeah.
All of them
Yes.
they were all convicted on federal civil rights violations. 190 years to 200 years combined for all of them. I think most of them are dead now in prison.
Yeah. So keep that in mind when we're talking about Aryan Nation, kind of this uprise. It was MLK was doing amazing things in his life. MLK, I truly believe we would not have the abolishment of segregation if MLK did not exist. He was an amazing pioneer.
Yes, he was.
Unfortunately, his life was ended very shortly. I couldn't imagine how different everything would be if he were still alive. The stuff that he would still be fighting for to this day. Because unfortunately, and we'll talk about this when it gets to a few other things, because we will be eventually be talking about some more recent movements and all of that stuff. But unfortunately, there are points where America unfortunately repeats bad history. It seems to be every 10, 15 years, we get a repeat.
Yes, we do, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, and of course I'm talking about Rodney King. We're talking about that incident, and then we move 10, 15 years, and then we have the whole George Floyd incident and things like that. And unfortunately, and eventually later on we will touch on all that stuff more modern, because I was in law enforcement during George Floyd and BLM and all of that stuff. So we will touch on that eventually. But so with that being said, in the late 1980s, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, better known to as everybody's most hated three-letter organization, the ATF, because they don't do anything but take our guns.
And kill dogs, apparently.
Yeah. They got involved with Randy Weaver due to an undercover operation. Weaver was entrapped into illegally selling 2 sawed-off shotguns to an ATF informant. Okay. This is the thing. We get the words here. He was entrapped into illegally selling 2 sawed-off shotguns. There's no such thing as entrapment when it comes to this. It's an undercover sting. You're not supposed to know that they are a cop. So entrapment can't exist for this. So he illegally sold shotguns to an undercover or to an ATF informant.
And that's the key difference here with it. So this individual is not an agent, as in, like, man went to, like, the ATF Academy, and he went to, the way my knowledge is about this, this was more or less a criminal who had gotten caught by the ATF for some other thing, had agreed to basically just be that. He was a paid informant. The ATF paid him to give information to agents on activities. Now, in this case, he was operating in the Aryan Nation, and he knew Randy Weaver, and he obviously this is where the first of many controversies are. This informant was basically told, "You're not giving us anything. The money is being cut off." So the informant, in an effort to keep his government check coming in as it was, approached Randy Weaver. This is coming from Randy Weaver. Approached him saying, "Hey, Randy, I hear you're hard up for some money. I've got these shotguns I need you to modify to like saw off the barrel and modify them. I'll give you $500 to like these 4 shotguns. Go modify them for me." Now, again, Randy Weaver, while his family is trying to live off grid, that doesn't he's not bringing in an income. He can't.
Correct.
He is not. More or less, Randy Weaver is not in a position to say, "Oh, hey, sorry, guy, I can't do that. That's illegal." Oh, $500 to do that? Yeah, I'll do it.
Well,
I
and
mean,
of course,
what does
he's off the grid too. So, how am I going to get caught?
Exactly. Well, and besides, what does Randy Weaver care? He doesn't like the government anyway. He doesn't recognize these laws.
Fuck you.
So yeah. So in this case, is it entrapment? I personally think it kind of is. I mean, as you said, an agent has rules, and even an informant has to have some rules on this. He can't approach the person. He can't say, "Hey, Randy, do this, and I'll give you $500." Okay, I did it. $500. You're under arrest. Yeah.
Okay,
whoa.
and here's
I understand it.
Here's the thing: is we in law enforcement, if you've worked law enforcement long enough, you establish CIs, criminal informants, confidential informants. These CIs are not there to make an arrest. They're there to get you information, to do it quietly, and they get paid for it. And usually, depending on what agencies you work with, where you live, all of that, they usually get paid pretty well. When I worked federally, I had some very well paid CIs. And of course, I was doing fugitive extradition, so CIs were a big help in my job. And I mean, and then you have the cheap side, like my dad had some that they would just sell out their friends for a black and mild.
Seriously?
No joke.
Oh yeah, man, not gonna lie. I kept several packs of black and milds in my patrol car.
They would sell out their friends for a single black and mild.
I'd be like, "Hey, yo, come here. I got something for you." Hand them a pack of black and milds, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, you can go find them over here at such and such."
Yeah.
All right.
Holy
See you
shit.
later.
My dad worked the hood for 20 years.
So Aaron, tell me something. Just because you probably have, no offense, Caleb, you probably
he has better CI information than I do.
Okay.
Mine are very different.
Tell me this, Aaron, from a professional thing. If you had a paid informant, obviously, we've already established, as a paid informant, he's supposed to give you intelligence. Is a paid informant supposed to like basically go up to somebody and solicit their help in an illegal activity and then turn on them and say, "Yeah, he did that"?
No, that, and I don't like the term entrapment. It's more coercion.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's more appropriate.
It would be entrapment
coercion.
if he was actually a cop.
Correct. Entrapment. The term entrapment pertains strictly to those in a law enforcement nature, whether it be local, state, federal, whatever. I'm forcing you and tricking you to do something illegal that you would not normally do, but you're convinced in such a way that it becomes a grandiose reward for you. In this case, $500
to a man that's not working
per shotgun. The man's hurting for money. He's trying to take care of his family. He's going to jump on that. Any reasonable person would do that.
I'm sorry. Listen,
I'm a firm believer in the law. If someone told me,
oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, I'm trying to keep my security clearance, but yes, I would do it. ATF.
Right.
Yeah.
And having said that, this is a man. Randy Weaver was not modifying these weapons on his own and selling them to the Aryan Nation. His involvement with Aryan Nation was strictly, ideological.
And
Yeah,
he was just providing a meeting place.
Correct. He
he
was trying
out
to
with
hang out with them, socialize with them, try and get them into his ideology, that kind of thing. But because the ATF is so hard up, and they at this time, the Aryan Nation was a huge target for them. Aryan Nation, Hell's Angels, and there was a third group, and I can't think of who it is off the top of my head.
Iron Order.
And if we were to go back and look at their involvement with Hell's Angels, they fucked that up as well. So in this instance, the CI is coercing him to do something that he would not normally do.
Oh no.
Your CIs do not do that.
No.
You will give them money that's marked. You'll tell them, we know this is a drug house. You know this is a drug house. This is the intel that you're giving us. In order for you to work off your part of the deal, you're going to go in there, use this marked money, and you're going to buy this exact amount of drugs. No more, no less. If you buy more, you're going to jail for possession. If you buy less, you're going to jail for theft because you took our money and you're trying to screw us. So that's it. That's all they would do. They would go in, they would buy it, they would come back, they would hand it to us. We would take and create a log in a report saying that we handed this CI number, blah, 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 a marked bill, serial number such and such, on this date, this time. He went into this house. He made this purchase from this person, and you give that description that he gives you, and all of that is put into your warrant. You go get that warrant approved. You go nail the guy. You find the marked bill, and boom, there's your evidence. So at no time is he going to random people saying, hey, yo, man, I need some drugs. I want some drugs. I got some money. That's not what they do.
Yeah.
No.
So
and
in this instance,
they typically don't provide stuff for these people to do. They don't say, oh, here's cocaine. Now I want you to sell it to me.
Yeah. No. It was all of mine came from like a random traffic stop, or I know they don't belong in the neighborhood. They're leaving the known drug house. I know that's where you bought the dope. Boom, nail them. Okay, here's the deal. See this? All this paperwork right here. This is your arrest affidavit. You're going to work this off. I'm going to put you in contact with another agent who's going to work with you. If I find out from him that you haven't done this, he's filing this paperwork and you're going to jail. Period.
And of course, you also get paid as well. And that's the thing. Like, it's all about the bigger fish. If we can cut the head off the snake, then the rest of the body dies. So that's where this came from. ATF has always been, they've always had a hard on for shit like this. And they've always gone outside of the rules.
Yeah, right. I mean, technically speaking, this is something that's right up their alley.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be, but I don't know if it's rather they're just perpetually, they don't get the budget, they don't care, or there's just, they have, the government has so little regard for them that they're just allowed to do whatever the hell they want. I don't know.
It's that last one.
ATF has historically had this dogma that we're untouchable. We can do what we want to do within these parameters. And now, mind you, their parameters are astronomical.
Yeah.
They're ridiculous. And as long as we operate within these parameters, then nobody can do anything to us.
Which, again, the whole thing that they exist for, first of all, I mean, it's just the DEA has probably done more to curb drug smuggling, other major drug operations, and everything. The FBI has probably done more against arms smuggling in our nation's law enforcement history than any other one. So I keep going back to it. It's like what is it? It's like that meme of those from the Office Space or something. It's like what exactly is it you do here?
Well, so there's a funny video I actually saw about an ATF agent. So this ATF agent in plain clothes shows up to this guy's house, bangs on the door, and demands to come see these guys' guns because he's going to take them all. And the guy calls the cops and says there's a guy claiming he's law enforcement. He's saying he's a cop, but he's in plain clothes. He's saying that he's going to come in here and take my guns and all of that. So cops roll up hot. They end up telling the guy to get on the ground. He won't listen. He goes, that's not going to happen. So all of the cops pulled their guns on him and tell him to get on the fucking ground, get on the ground. He goes, that's not going to happen. They go, get on the ground or you're getting tased. And one of them pulls out the taser, and they ended up arresting the guy. And they were like, listen, this is, you can't do this. You have to identify yourself as an ATF agent. You can't just walk around and do whatever the fuck you want to do. And of course he pulled the whole, oh, this isn't going to be good for you guys bullshit, that federal agent. Listen, I was a federal agent, but ATF is a totally different thing.
I mean, aren't you supposed to at least, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, or either one, correct me if I'm wrong, aren't you supposed to give like a courtesy notification to local law enforcement saying, hey, yes, I'm operating in the area?
The only time you do not is if it is a clandestine operation.
Correct.
Yeah, but for something like this, sounds like it would be a routine thing.
For that, 100%. And number one, they're not going to go door to door, and they're not going to go on their own. They're going to be two agents, hand in hand. They're going to have paperwork that substantiates why they need to go into your house and seize the weapons. They're not just going to go and do a gun grab.
Well, the funny thing is, though, turns out that this guy actually was an ATF agent in plain clothes.
Yeah. So what was he trying to do? Did he screw something up at the office? Like, here's my chance to make up for that.
No, I don't know. Nothing really came of it because the ATF buried it, like they usually do. So, but from what I can tell, the guy legally bought a silencer or something like that. Of course, you can buy a silencer, you just have to have a special license for it. Apparently, the ATF had no record of this guy's license, even though he has one. He bought something that they claim was illegal. They wanted to take the gun or seize the gun or whatever, but they did it the wrong way. I will say, again, for me, my last 2 years in law enforcement, I was federal, working with the marshals, doing fugitive extradition. When you serve a warrant, when you do all of that, you notify federally, you notify the local jurisdiction because, number one, you want those extra bodies out there to help you too. So I'm going to notify that department and say, hey, we're in the area, we're serving this warrant. Do you have any guys you can spare to block the roads or just give us an extra gun, blah, blah, blah. So enough babbling about the ATF.
And there was a lot of times where I would utilize those federal resources.
Yep.
Where I knew that the guy that I wanted was in that house, but my hands were tied because I had to meet certain criteria in order for me to enter that house. As opposed to a federal agent, he can walk in that house anytime he fucking wants to.
I don't want
when power. It's in regards to a parolee or probation or whatever. And so I'd call them up and the guys that I knew and be like, hey man, what's going on? Hey, I'm trying to get hold of so-and-so. I believe he's at this house. Oh, all right. I'll meet you there. And he'd come in and he'd go, you know what? It looks like it's, oh yeah, this is a good day for a cursory check. Here we go. Yeah. And he'd make entry and boom, it's done. So it kind of went hand in hand.
Yeah.
You know?
So we're gonna kind of bounce back and forth between the different things that happened. So again, that in 1986, at a meeting of the Aryan Nations, that's when Randy Weaver was introduced to the informant. While Weaver had associations with the group, it's essential to clarify he wasn't an active member. His connection was more social or ideological than organizational. Over the time, the informant had built a rapport with Weaver, and again in 1989, the informant convinced Weaver to sell him 2 sawed-off shotguns. Sawed-off shotguns, of course, can be illegal under U.S. federal law if they do not meet certain length requirements, among other stipulations. This sale being unlawful gave the ATF leverage over Weaver, which I'm going to kick that back to an old video. There was a Democratic senator or governor that she was all against the Second Amendment, and she made a political video. Her husband helped her, where she bought a shotgun, and on video talking about how bad guns were, she cut the barrel short.
Yeah. I
remember
that.
On video,
it was a senator, yeah.
She created a sawed-off shotgun.
Yeah.
And so people ended up reporting the video to the ATF. She got arrested for it. Yeah. It was hilarious. She goes, "I didn't know," and they were like, "That's the point." So yeah, funny. I remembered that and I thought it was hilarious. So after catching Weaver in the illegal sale, the ATF approached him with an offer. The essence of the deal was for Weaver to become an informant for them on the Aryan Nations. In exchange, the ATF would likely be lenient or drop the firearms charges. Of course, he doesn't like the government, so he refused the offer. This refusal, coupled with his fugitive status from his missing court date, which we will talk about here in a second, heightened tensions between him and the federal agencies. So basically what happened is, after the illegal firearms sale, he was arrested in early 91. He was charged, released on bail, and a court date was set for him to address the charges. What happened was his trial was initially set for February 19th, 1991. However, due to a clerical error, the notice sent to Weaver stated March 20th, 1991. Oh, exactly 1 year before I was born. March 20th is my birthday.
Yeah. That's a pretty big whoops there.
So what happens is, and it happens all the time, believe it or not, but nowadays we catch it and we're lenient with it. Believing his court date was in March, Weaver did not show up on February 19th. The court, unaware of the date mix-up on the notice sent to Weaver, deemed his absence as failure to appear, or what we call FTA, which had significant legal implications. Of course, anytime you are an FTA, and I'm just going to tell everybody, no matter what your court case is, whether it's something like this, which is a felony and a federal offense, or something as simple as a traffic violation, do not miss your court dates. You won't believe how many people get a traffic violation. Something as simple as not having your car registered or not having insurance. You fix it. However, you do not go to court. Guess what? You're getting an FTA, and just like they did with him, they're going to give you a bench warrant for your arrest. Now, here's the thing. There's different types of warrants. A bench warrant, typically, in most places, they're not going to... Now, in his case, this is a little different because these are federal charges, but typically with a bench warrant, they're not going to come look for you. However, if you are pulled over, or if you happen to walk into the courthouse or a building like that, your name pops up, they're going to arrest you if you pop up. Let's say you're going to the airport. Well, if for some reason they look into you, that bench warrant's going to pop up. They're going to call and they're going to extradite you. So typically, 9 times out of 10, you're not being looked for on a bench warrant. You will just be arrested if you are found by happenstance. But with his stuff, it being federal, it being firearms, and the ATF just having a hard on for this guy, he becomes a fugitive. So, because of that, basically what happened is he was a perceived flight risk due to missing the court date. The Marshals initiated surveillance on the Weaver property in the early 90s. Their aim was to assess the situation, figure out how to best arrest Weaver without incident. The surveillance continued on and off for several months leading up to the tragic events of 1992. So, again, the U.S. Marshals took over the case. One of my favorite jobs I ever had. Due to the fugitive status, they began formulating a plan to apprehend Weaver. However, given his associations, the location of his residence, and concerns about potential confrontations, they decided to proceed with caution. The Marshals initiated discreet surveillance on the Weaver property, hoping to capture him in a manner that minimized potential conflict. The surveillance continued intermittently for many months, with Marshals often studying the family's movements from a distance. So, the fugitive status combined with the family's isolationist tendencies, Weaver's past associations, and rumors, some that were inflated, about the Weavers being heavily armed and suspicious of any government intervention elevated the perceived threat level. As a result, the Marshals took a very cautious and extended approach to apprehending Weaver, which ultimately extended the timeline and tension leading up to the standoff. Now, as discussed earlier, by 1992, Randy Weaver had been under intermittent surveillance by the U.S. Marshal Service for several months due to his failure to appear in court. August 21st, 1992, several U.S. Marshals were scoping the Weaver property to assess the situation. The Weaver's dogs detected the Marshals, and the family's young son Samuel Weaver and a family friend named Kevin Harris went to investigate. A confrontation ensued. It's disputed who fired the first shot, but in the ensuing gunfight, a 14-year-old Samuel was shot in the back and killed. Marshal William Deegan was also killed in this altercation.
So yeah, this is probably the first real controversy and what is going to fuel the crazies as it was. So I've looked this up. I've seen several things on here, and so how it essentially worked just like it is, a little more, added a little more into this. So the Marshall team was doing exactly just that. They were scoping it out, looking for the best way of how to approach the situation. The family dogs were, they were, the son and the friend were in the, and I believe Randy Weaver was also there too.
He was not outside yet until he wasn't outside until the dog started barking.
Yeah. The dogs go right toward the Marshals because they detect them, and these dogs are guard dogs, so they go right to the threat. The dog attacks one of the Marshals, and the Marshal is forced to shoot and kill the dog.
Which,
the son,
justified, I would have done the same thing.
Yes, the dog, there's no hatred to the dog. It's just doing what it's doing, but, a big German Shepherd is trying to maul you. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Samuel Weaver goes there, and supposedly he shouts out, "You son of a bitch, you killed my dog." He opens fire. The Marshal, and now and then everything goes sideways at this point. The Marshals apparently try to identify themselves. The gunfire is going on. Randy Weaver's friend is wounded, and then as he said, the son is shot and killed while in the back as he appeared to be, leaving the scene. Now, Randy Weaver says that they were retreating, the Marshals were shooting them. The Marshal says they were fired on first. They tried to identify themselves, and then they were fired upon. I looked at this, and my opinion on this matter, I think this is going to sound weird, so I think they're both telling the truth, but it's for one thing. So I think it worked just like this. The dog attacks the Marshals. Marshals kill the dog. The son opened fire because he doesn't know he doesn't know these are Marshals. He just knows that some dude just killed his dog, and he shoots, probably because he's a 14-year-old kid. He doesn't know any better. Marshals open fire because they're being shot at, and in the exchange, a marshal is killed, the son is killed, and the friend is wounded. And then Randy Weaver and his family retreat into the cabin because they think they're under fire from somebody.
So
here's my question: at what point did the marshals have the time to identify themselves? Because as far as I can tell, there's like seconds in between where there's a firefight.
Here's my thoughts. Number one, the marshals, and I'm going to put this out there, the marshals were there legally. They had a warrant, which means they legally can be on the property. For those that are going to say, oh, they shouldn't have been there. Legally, they were allowed. They could have walked right into the house if they wanted to and grabbed the guy. They just wanted to try and do stuff safely. What I think, I agree with you that both sides are true. What probably happened is the dogs bark, the dog attacks the marshal shoots, kills the dog, and when Samuel Weaver says, "You killed my fucking dog," the guys are yelling out, "We're U.S. Marshals, we're U.S. Marshals." Samuel, again, 14-year-old boy, his best friend was just killed, his dog, and at this point, again, being 14, his emotions are going to run high. He's shot at tin cans before, but never a person. And he pulls out his gun and in the heat of the moment doesn't hear what they say and shoots, kills. Then he retreats back. In my opinion, I don't think he's retreating to run away. I think Dad trained him and he's retreating to find cover.
Yeah.
So, like therefore, technically, I would have shot the kid too in the back.
No, I personally don't think the marshals did anything wrong.
I would have shot him in the back.
The only difference is that I just don't personally think they identify themselves, only because where is the time to do it? I think the kid, from what I understand, and this is coming from Randy Weaver and his friend, there was literally, you shot my dog, you son of a bitch, and then there's gun starts firing. So I'm like, I get the feeling the marshals, when they got the fallen marshal and they retreated and they started like reorganizing, they're like, you all heard it, right? We identified ourselves, right?
And not necessarily, because again, I've been in a firefight. I've told the story of me being shot, all of that. I've identified myself under duress, where you are in the firefight and you're yelling out, U.S. Marshals, federal agent, federal agent, federal agent. And so that could be how they identify themselves. Yes, it was after the gunfire happened, but in that split second, your fight or flight comes in, and it's, I have to protect myself. And then while they're taking cover in this firefight, it's, oh shit, we need to make sure we identify ourselves. U.S. Marshals, U.S. Marshals. And they probably did identify themselves. It's just after the fact.
Yeah. Probably.
So, and this is giving them the benefit of the doubt, and from my personal experience being in this situation.
But again, I do believe it's like in this situation, it's like, I don't see where the marshals went wrong. Now, as we're going forward with this, we're going to find out this is probably the last of the
good stuff.
Yeah, at this point, it's like, it's all for the good, for U.S. government and their actions. It's all downhill from them.
That's because
it's all downhill.
That's because we get the FBI involved and they like to fuck things up.
Yeah.
So, after the initial confrontation, situation quickly escalated. The FBI was called in, and the HRT, hostage rescue team, an elite unit, was deployed. Now, when we talk about the HRT, obviously you hear us talk about SWAT teams all the time. HRT is the SWAT team of all SWAT teams. If you make it into the FBI HRT team, you are the baddest of the bad. I would say from the guys I know personally that have been HRT, 9 out of 10 of them are ex-Special Forces. Green Berets, SEALs, Rangers, things like that. You do not get into HRT without being the best of the best. Now, the Weaver family, grieving and now even more distrustful of the authorities, barricaded themselves in their home. ROEs, rules of engagement. These are typical in any combat situation, whether overseas or here. Any law enforcement agency is given ROEs. ROEs can also change based on situations, like we're going to see here. Do I agree with these ROEs? Absolutely not. The rules of engagement for the FBI's HRT at Ruby Ridge were highly controversial. They were more aggressive than the standard rules, allowing agents to shoot armed adult members of the Weaver family on sight. Now, I will tell you that the typical ROE is you do not fire until you are fired upon. That is standard through, as far as I know, every single agency in the world. You do not fire unless fired upon, or unless you feel the imminent danger of being killed. So the shoot on sight, that's typically given to a special forces sniper that's downrange looking for a member of Al Qaeda. Hey, you see this guy, this is our ace of spades, you have a shoot on sight order.
I mean, this is something that we tell our guys in the military.
Yeah.
And then Randy Weaver, for all of his anti-government rhetoric and questionable choices, and some of his questionable life choices of what led to this incident, he's still an American citizen, due process in. This is not good. So, and keep in mind also, if anybody wants to look this up, this is they make it sound like his cabin is right there and the FBI or whatever right on his lawn. This is a mountain.
Yeah, these are 20 acres.
Yeah, this is a mountain that this cabin is on, and with the house on top of this mountain. So keep in mind, they're surrounding him, but reality speaking, they're not really in. They're not really in sight of this. So it's not like they could say, "Well, we had to watch out for agents. He's got a gun." Randy Weaver can't shoot anybody. Not really. At least not at this point.
Yeah. So we have a Anakin Obi-Wan situation. I have the high ground.
You underestimate my power. But no. But what I say, I want to make sure everybody understands is that this is not something where literally the FBI is across the street and Randy Weaver is well within nominal firearms range of the FBI, where they could say, "Oh, we're in danger." No, they're not.
No,
they're not.
It would have taken a sniper to do anything to them.
So this is how it also really emphasizes when we say this is controversial. This is very controversial. There is no immediate, as far as most people can discern, there's no immediate threat unless they approach this. Unless they approach his home, which of course then that's a whole different spiel.
Yeah. So on August 22nd, while Randy Weaver, his daughter Sarah, and Harris were visiting Samuel's body in a nearby shed, an HRT sniper fired at Randy, attempting to hit his spine to incapacitate him. Randy was injured, but the bullet didn't achieve its intended purpose. As the group rushed back to the house, another shot was fired by the sniper intended for Harris. Tragically, the bullet passed through Vicky Weaver's head, killing her while she was holding her infant daughter, Alicia. Alright, so really quick, I know we kind of keep branching off, but there is another rule in law enforcement and in combat. We don't shoot to maim, we shoot to kill.
Or at least shoot to end the threat.
So here's the thing. And I'm going to tell you from personal experience, being involved in shootings, and from a legal standpoint, my dad will I'm sure agree with this. If I can shoot you, if I feel comfortable enough that shooting you in the leg or in the hand or in the arm is enough to stop the threat, I should not have to shoot you at all when I have other means, such as a taser, pepper spray, things like that. The threat was not immediate enough, and that's where officers get into trouble. Because, and where what people don't understand, oh, why did they kill him? They could have just shot him in the leg. That's legal ramification for me to say, oh, well, I didn't feel threatened enough, so I could have used another means to incapacitate.
Exactly.
Agree?
Oh, 100%. I mean, like our training was you shoot to neutralize. It's if it happens that the subject of recipient of your fire downrange dies, so be it. But you're shooting to neutralize. You're also shooting center mass. Now, if that center mass happens to be his torso, and that's what you're doing, then you're shooting center mass to neutralize the threat.
Correct.
If that center mass happens to be his head, you're shooting to neutralize the threat.
Yeah, exactly.
At no point is any one of us going to shoot the arm, the hand, the leg to neutralize a suspect.
Correct.
Number one, that shot is 1 in a million, even for SWAT guys. Number two,
I think I'm a good shot, but there ain't no fucking way.
Agreed. I'm right there with you. I know what I can do, and I would not even attempt that, especially under duress.
Yeah.
And number two, it has been proven time and time and time again that shooting in such a fashion does not neutralize the threat. It doesn't.
Adrenaline.
That's why training went to you shoot center mass no matter what the center mass is. And then, of course, there's other drills if they have body armor and all that kind of stuff,
Correct.
and we won't go into any of that. But the whole shoot the leg thing, shoot the hand thing, I agree with Caleb. If it's coming down to that, you shouldn't be shooting anyways.
Correct.
You should be utilizing a beanbag round. You should be utilizing tear gas or pepper spray or taser or a taser round out of a shotgun, whatever.
So
there are a lot of different options.
And that's the thing too, is that's something that it's amazing. So of course, back then, this is the early 90s, tasers didn't exist. I will say that I never had to deal with not having a taser. But I know my dad went from not having one to having one. And I know tasers revolutionized the law enforcement game, because there was no more of having to pepper spray your fucking self in the face every time you're trying to pepper spray somebody and get that spread out to everybody. Now you're incapacitated. Now you just have this taser that can hit them. They're down for the most part. I've had a suspect that we shot him 6 times with a taser and he kept walking, but
Jesus,
he was high on PCP. And he was 7'3" and 400 pounds. We had to break his kneecaps to get him down, and he still tried to crawl towards us. Yeah, I think my dad had a situation similar to that too. And the guy was butt ass naked.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's been
Florida bath salts.
Yeah, one guy, he was a big.
Kids don't do drugs.
We hit him 6 times, and he just looked at us and went, "Please don't do that again."
And everybody put their tasers away.
I just dropped my taser and pulled my Glock out and was like, "Well, then this is the alternative." He goes, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "I want you to get down on the ground and put your hands behind your back."
All you had to do was ask.
All you have to do is ask. I'm like, "Bro, we asked you 20 minutes ago before we stuck you with 10 taser darts."
And I'm, like, if you guys are wondering what a taser feels like, you can actually I'll say this: I'd rather be tased over pepper sprayed any day.
Yeah.
So you can ask. There are a lot of departments that you have to sign a waiver, of course, but they will allow you to be shocked by a taser so you understand what it feels like. So if you're ever wondering, it's not fun, but it's an experience so you can understand. And again, and I'll let everybody know that in order to carry a taser, you have to be tased. All of us are tased. That's part of the certification. I was tased every single year for my certification. It sucked.
Just to give, for those of you who aren't brave and don't want to do it, no, I'm just telling you right now, you're fine for not doing it. But imagine every nerve ending, every nerve that you have in your body being attached to a vice, and then that thing being torqued to like 1,000 pounds per square inch instantaneously and being held on there as tight as you can for 5 seconds. It doesn't feel like 5 seconds, it feels a hell of a lot longer. That's how I felt. And then as soon as that happens, you are immediately let go and you flop down on the thing like a marionettes with their strings cut. And yeah, some very interesting things can happen. For myself, I got the full ride. I went down and I just flopped down on the ground and I just laid there. I had no motivation to move. My will to live was severely lacking, if I'm being completely honest with myself. And the instructor just carried on instructing while I just laid there moaning and asking for my mommy.
So, and then just so everybody's aware, a taser can deliver up to 50,000 volts to bridge the air gap. But so basically it's the way a typical taser works is you have a cartridge on a gun. The X26 taser, that's your most common. They have the new one, which I got to have, and it's absolutely gorgeous. You have 2 cartridges, so you can actually tase 2 different people at the same time. And it's very much fun. So 50,000 volts initially, shoots it out. You hear the pop. Confetti also comes out, and that is a safety thing so at the end when you do your evidence, you have to collect the confetti and all of that. It's a pain in the ass. But fun fact that the new taser confetti does not come out, just so you know. And Dad, I know you never got to deal with the new taser. Yeah, there's no confetti anymore because it is all digital now. So they can take a chip from the handle of the taser and put it into a computer now, which is really cool. But when it hits you, it's about 1,200 to 1,500 volts.
It's not fun. It's not fun.
A car battery is 12 volts, just so everybody knows. But yeah. So, there's all of that to say, there's plenty of other things that could have been done. Vicky Weaver should not have been killed. Especially
they should not have been shooting regardless.
Correct.
If you want to put snipers in position, that's fine, just in case.
Correct.
But keep in mind, the main camp of the FBI and marshals at this point is down at the bottom of this hill, mountain hill, whatever you want to call it. The agents would approach that point, but they would have to take a little bit of a hike down up there to get there. So it's fine to have them there, but again, unless Randy Weaver and company were about to charge down the hill, guns blazing, there's no reason to shoot these people. That's no.
Following Vicky Weaver's death, the family was even more hesitant to trust any attempts at negotiation. Standoff drew national attention, of course. Media outlets converged on Ruby Ridge, and the public watched as events unfolded. Given the escalating situation and its public profile, the FBI sought outside help for negotiations. Bo Gritz, a former Green Beret and third-party presidential candidate, was called in to mediate. He had credibility with the Weaver family due to his background and outsider status. Over several days, Gritz was able to establish a rapport with Randy Weaver and facilitate communication between him and the authorities. On August 31st, 1992, after 11 days, Randy Weaver surrendered peacefully. Kevin Harris also surrendered. Both were arrested and taken into custody. Now, Ruby Ridge siege had significant implications. FBI's handling of the situation, especially rules of engagement, faced intense criticism. The incident became a rallying cry for anti-government and militia groups who saw it as a glaring example of government overreach and aggression. Randy Weaver and Kevin Harris were acquitted of murder and conspiracy charges at their subsequent trial. Harris was completely acquitted, while Weaver was convicted of failing to appear for his original court date. Government later awarded Weaver and his family a $3.1 million settlement due to the actions of federal agents during the siege.
I mean, this was for everybody. This was a shit show. It really isn't labeled. This was a shit show. So the FBI the marshals show up to do a routine surveillance to figure out how they're going to grab Randy Weaver. They're discovered. Firefight. Randy Weaver's son is killed. His friend is severely wounded. The siege begins. Now, while this is happening, the FBI shows up to help set up a negotiation to take over from the marshals, because now this isn't really the marshals' game anymore. And while this is happening, they're essentially the FBI feels like they're being surrounded, because all of the people that they are investigating and trying to bring up on racketeering charges, conspiracy, every which way that they can do, white supremacists, this is all their home bases are. Actually, in fact, during the siege, there was actually another standoff that was happening. It was downplayed, but it actually almost turned into another incident. 3 members of, I believe it was the Aryan Nation, tried to actually run the blockade, as it was, to Randy Weaver's home. They had guns, ammunition, and medical supplies. They were preparing to basically run the barricade and join up with Randy Weaver in the siege. So this was insane. Like, I actually, for anybody who wants to see like a visual of what this looked like, the PBS did a great documentary on Ruby Ridge and how just everybody in the local area was right on the barricade. They were just screaming profanities and other, obscenities at the government. The one area, I believe it was part of the barricade, is where the press was allowed. It became kind of like a rally center. Every freaking far-right, white supremacist, Christian revival leader that was tied with, white supremacy and other radical racial politics at the time was uses as like a jumping off point, a media spectacle as it was for it. So I mean, this was insane. But yeah, it's Randy Weaver would actually, up until a few years before he died, which was actually last year, he became kind of the spokesperson on anti-government kind of stuff. Actually, it point of fact, actually, even after everything, his family still owns Ruby Ridge. It's still family property.
His daughters were awarded $100,000 each. He was given $1 million. His daughters were given $100,000 each, and then he put the property in their names. And I believe at least one of them lives there.
I think the daughter Sarah, she does some kind of like non-profit or some kind of like awareness thing where I forget what it is, but she has some kind of like charity or non-profit organization that that she uses Ruby Ridge for. I don't know what it is or what it's about, but I remember she's kind of the main one who kind of handles that. It is interesting to note, though, just Randy Weaver, who kind of started off as like this, fire and brimstone Christian zealot, he actually ended up dying as self-professed atheist. Which honestly, after everything that happened, I can't really say I blame him.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is kind of Ruby Ridge. Now,
Yeah.
as we'll see in our next episode that we're going to do, I think we're covering Waco, right?
Yeah. So we're covering Waco next. We're gonna see that this incident was a lesson to a lot of law enforcement agencies, especially the FBI, on how to do stuff a little bit differently, de-escalation techniques, things like that. That plays a big part in Waco. However,
That didn't happen.
They took their time, but it backfired.
Yeah.
Backfired.
I mean, they do I remember I said earlier, federal government has a tendency to do knee-jerk reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So here you have the FBI going way off the ranch in Ruby Ridge. ATF is involved in Waco, and there's a whole knee-jerk reaction, and they screwed the pooch. And you'll see in our next episode that at one point they had home field advantage, and if they would have pressed per operating procedure, it would have went down the way it went down. But they didn't do so, and here we are with another fiasco. So
yeah, that it's definitely going to be interesting because, of course, Waco. We're going to be talking about that next week. That obviously is going to lead to Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombings, as he was motivated by both Ruby Ridge and Waco.
Final thoughts, guys, on this?
This is like typical. I mean, I worked for the federal. We all worked for the federal government at one point in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But they fuck up,
and
it took them a long time up until not that long ago. Actually, they probably didn't really learn anything till 9/11 time, early 2000s, how to deal with this kind of stuff. So I'm glad we've learned differently. I will say from my federal training, we are trained very differently than this. But yeah, I think if they would have done their standard SOPs, standard operating procedures, and the ROEs would have been as they should have been, this would have ended a lot differently. I think that Griggs.
Oh, Griggs.
I think he could have completely talked him out of it before any shooting would have happened. I think if they would have stayed back, if they would have called him in from the beginning, he would have been able to pull them out with no issues, instead of having an 11-day siege.
Yeah. For me, now I agree completely with Caleb. I think the government really screwed this from just, not necessarily from the word. Well, actually, yeah, kind of from the word go. You had the ATF going off the word of a paid informant, not an agent. This whole thing always gets me. It's like you're literally using a criminal to do your dirty work, outside of the parameters that you're supposed to. But I really feel like if also part of this is kind of on Randy Weaver as well. Now, I say this in this point, like, I get he was financially struggling and everything, and he was coerced, enticed to do something that he should have never have done. But at the same point, though, Randy Weaver was, he did not want to go to do that. He did not. He let his ignorance and all. He believed all these ignorant things about the government. I mean, it doesn't take a halfway decent lawyer would have been able to beat this. It would have been literally, oh, how'd you get your information? We have a paid informant. You mean an agent? No, it's an informant. Okay, yeah, screw this. would I really believe Randy Weaver probably would have been if he had just barring the clerical error, because even after that, he's still well past his court date. He didn't go. Like even though the court date was wrong, the clerical error, he even past March 20th, he was not going. He was not leaving his home. He was determined not to leave his home because he didn't trust the government. He thought they were going to take his family away from him. He was going to go away for life, or what he felt was a trumped up charge. And I really felt like in this case, he could have. Yeah, I'm not saying he would have gotten off, like, but at the same time, it's like at a certain point, you've obviously got a lawyer at this point. I'm sure his lawyer was telling him, "Go to court. You're never going to
stop talking to his lawyer."
Then at a certain point, then Randy Weaver's got to take his own accountability. He's got to say, "Hey, I need to face this in court. I may not trust the government. I may think this is bullshit. Me staying up in my cabin on my property is not going to make the problem go away."
Yeah.
And that's what I just, at that point, at this time, I really felt like he thought, if I just stay here, it'll all go away. They'll forget about me. It's like, no, Randy, that's not going to happen. They're not going to forget about you. Even if they don't care about you even if they decide they don't care for you to try and rat on the Aryan nations, you're still under a federal gun charges. That's not going to go away. So this is where I feel Randy Weaver's responsibility for the situation is. If he just faced up to it, fought this like everybody else does, maybe he goes away for a long time, maybe he doesn't. We'll never know.
Yeah.
Aaron?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. He is distrustful of the government to begin with, but here we are with the ATF and the FBI debacle kind of proved his point,
Yeah.
He was adamantly against them in fear of them trying to take everything that he had, including family. They end up killing several of his family members, so playing devil's advocate, he in that aspect, he was right, I believe that the whole thing could have been avoided, like Caleb said, had the negotiations been allowed to continue properly without the snipers having a green light, then it would have been a different outcome. Unfortunately, this time in history, the FBI is trying to make a name for themselves. They're under scrutiny for the way several things have been handled. Several investigations have gone wrong. Now they're trying to clamp down on the Aryan Nation and Hell's Angels and a couple other clandestine groups. And so they're basically flexing their muscles. And look at us. This is who we are. We have this on lockdown kind of thing. You don't need to criticize us. ATF, they're ATF. They are what they are. There's a reason why in today's time, right here, right now, they're talking about disbanding the whole ATF. Just history speaks for itself. I think it's a tragedy. I don't like the fact that the sniper, for whatever reason, misses his shot twice, and the second time cost the life of his wife. That's just poor marksmanship. You should know what your target is at all time, especially at that level of a marksman that they are. It's not acceptable. So now again, this is armchair quarterbacking the whole thing. We weren't there. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what he's seeing, what the fluidity of the situation, that kind of thing. Just knowing that we know what we know, I think the FBI went way beyond their ROE way beyond, and used the fact that one of their own had already been taken out as their reason for doing so. Well, they're armed, they've already killed one of our own, so we're going to get them before they get us, kind of thing. And I think that's what they hung their shirt on, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, history does not really kind of back them up on that.
Yep.
No, it does not.
Well, all right. So, with that, we want to thank you all for visiting the Scarlet Tavern. Remember to turn in your glasses, push in your seat, and as always, tip the bard. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.